All right. So for this one, I feel like we could just kind of walk through the exercise together, talk about each of the commands. If anyone has any questions about any of the commands, let me just move these. So the first thing I wanted us to do was to just use the man. So anytime you ever just need to look up any additional information about a command, you can always use the man to pull up a manual of what that command will do. So in our case, if I did man, then you can see that it's going to pull up a manual of the manual. So it'll give us information about the name of the specific command. It'll give us a synopsis of that command and arguments that it can be used with, a brief description. So if you ever just need to pull up a quick information about a command, then you could use the man to pull it up. So the first command besides man that we learned about was cat. So if we pull up man cat, we can see cat is concatenate and print files. So the description, the cat utility will read files sequentially, writing them to the standard outputs. So what we can use cat for is we can use cat to see the contents of a file. So in our case, we had these three files: laziness, impatience, and hubris. So if I go into those directories, so if I do cat laziness.txt, do I even have it? Oh, I don't even have it. I need to do it in these starter files. There we go. So cat laziness.txt, then you can see it printed out the contents of that file for me. But I do the same thing with the impatience.txt. Let me see it printed that out. So if you ever just need to quickly see what the contents of a file is, that's where cat is really useful. I don't know if you remember, but way back during your setup, you had to add an SSH key to GitHub. And so you had to print the SSH key in the terminal so that you could copy it to go add it to GitHub. So that's where cat is really useful, was I needed to print something that existed on my computer so I could just kind of copy the contents so that I can kind of do something with it. So if you ever just kind of need to print the contents of a file so that you can, grab it, access it, or just so that you can see what's inside of a file, then you can use cat to help you out.
So you can copy using cat?
No, cat just prints.
Oh, okay,
I would still manually go copy after. It's just cat will print it.
okay.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is it's used a lot with SSH keys. Like sometimes I need to print my SSH key so that I can add it to GitHub. Exactly. So I could use cat to easily, print out the contents of it. And in this case, we also use the contents of a file to create a new file. So whenever you use the greater than symbol, like what we did right here, it's going to take the contents of what's on the left, and then it's going to create a new file with those. So if we copy this. So now I'm going to be creating a file called 3virtues.txt, which is going to contain everything from laziness, impatience, and hubris. And now just to verify that it worked, if I cat 3virtues.txt, it'll print everything that's in that file, and you can see it printed those three points that existed in each of those individual files. So cat, very, very useful for whenever I just want to print and see what is currently inside of a file. Any questions on cat? Okay. The next one is ls. So we'll do the man ls so that we can see what the manual says about it. We can see that ls says that it will list directory contents. So for each operand that names a file of a type other than a directory, ls is going to display the name as well as any requested or associated information. So we can use ls whenever we just want to print the current state of all of the files in our directory. So if I were to do ls you can see it printed all of the files and directories that currently exist in my current location. So you can see it showed me all of these files, the and.txt, command line basics, hubris. So out of all the commands, this is probably one of, if not the one that I use the most, because it's just really handy to see all the files and directories I have available to me. So that way I know what I need to CD into, or what's it called, especially like I have a folder where I keep all my side projects and everything. So throughout, the last 4 years or whatever, I've had quite a lot of projects. So since I have such a big directory, ls can help me kind of see all of the files inside so that I can see the different names of the projects and whatnot. But if one thing you'll note, you'll see that I don't see any files that begin with a period. So sometimes I may have a file or a directory that begins with a period. In the case of, for instance, you have a Git folder, and that's what's keeping track of all your Git remote stuff and whatnot. So that's where this -a flag could come into play. So if we do a man for ls right here, and then we look at the description so that we can see what all of the other commands do, we can see -a. So -a will include directory entries whose name begin with a dot, except for dot and dot dot, automatically set for the super user unless I is specified. So if I want to print files that begin with a dot, then that means that I would need to include that -a flag, because that's what's going to include. So now if I do ls-a, I don't have any current files that have a period, but let me create one. And now when I did ls-a, you can see it's also showing me the file with the period before it. Whereas then if I just did ls, you can see I don't see that file. So ls-a is going to show all files, even if they begin with a period. ls will not show any files that begin with a period. Let's take a look at what the -f option does. So if we do man ls, we can see -f going to display a slash immediately after the path name that is a directory. So when I do an ls right now, you can see I have a mix of files and directories. For instance, I have lol.txt, which is a file, but I have lfz staff, which is a directory, or Pokemons, which is a directory. But by looking at it, the only way I can tell the difference is with the file extension, right? .md, .text. Well, if I do ls-f, oh, does it need to be a capital F? Yeah, it needs to be a capital F, but now you can see it adds the slash after all the ones that are directories. So now I have a visual indicator that not only something is a file, but something is also a directory. And you could also combine them. So if I were to do -a and big F, then you can see it'll list out all files that begin with a period because of that -a, but it'll also list out all files, or it'll add that slash to all directories because of that big F.
Well, what I was like thinking, so I thought A lists all files,
It does list all files, yes.
like including hidden too, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So ls-a will show all hidden files. ls by itself will not show hidden files.
And the small f shows without any.
Small f doesn't do anything, it doesn't look like. It just, what confuses me is because for the manual, you can see it says capital A, but it worked with lowercase a. So I thought it might work with lowercase f, but when I tried the lowercase f, it didn't work. So it seemed like you had to use the uppercase f.
Is it? I tried it.
Oh, it's because there's a lowercase a down here. So when I did lowercase a, I actually did this one right here. Include directories entries whose name begin with a dot. Whereas -f, you can see output is not sorted. So this option turns on -a, it also negates. So -lower f and -upper f are two completely different commands, and same with a. But that's what AF does, or ls does, is it allows you to just print the current files or directories that exist inside of your current directory. So out of all of them, this is probably the one that I use on a day-to-day basis. For instance, when you compile your code, right, you run tsc. Well, you should always be running tsc in the directory that contained the tsconfig. So sometimes your tsconfig is at the root of your repository, but sometimes it's in another directory. So you can do an ls to see if you have that tsconfig file, so that way you know you're in the correct directory to run your tsc. Any questions about ls? Let's do this so that way we follow along with you. Okay. The next one is PWD. So if we do man PWD to open up the manual for PWD, you can see all PWD does is it returns the working directory name. So it's just going to print out whatever your current working directory is. So in my case, I already see my working directory. It's up here in my terminal, the /exercises /command line basics /starter files. But if I were to do PWD, it's going to print out that whole thing. So you can see mine kind of got cut off because there wasn't enough space. So it had those 3 dots. So now when I did PWD, it printed out the whole local file path. So /users /Sean cost /repos, and it showed me the exact place where I'm currently at. So if you ever just need to see your whole current directory of where you're at, then you can use PWD to go ahead and print that out. So it's not one that I really use all that often, mainly because in my terminal it already shows me, but it can be beneficial in other environments. Like how I was saying, on your production servers at your company, you're going to want as little tooling on your production server as possible. So that way you reduce the chance of things impacting your website or your application or whatnot. So in your terminal, you're not going to have like fancy Git stuff or anything enabled. So your terminal on your production site may not have, something like this built in where it would show you the current directory. So you may need to use PWD in order to see kind of where you're at. So.
Just a question, Sean, if you want to see specific, like a -a shows by default every file with dot, right?
Yeah, for ls, yes.
If you want to show specific thing.
What do you mean show specific thing?
Like instead of dot, like dash, for example. Can you?
I don't know if ls has that capability. It may have like a different option, but
Okay.
ls is just always going to print the files in all the directories. And you could use other commands, to also include hidden files, to change the way the directories appear, but. Any questions about PWD? Okay, then the next one is echo. So if we do man echo, you can see all echo is it will write arguments to the standard output. So you can essentially just use echo to print something to the terminal. So if I did echo, hello world, you can see in the terminal, it printed hello world back to me. So it just printed that string back to it. It's used in scripts sometimes. So for instance, when you run a command and you'll see some text like, oh, this is done, feel free to close it or whatever. That's just an echo. That's just someone echoed some text to the terminal to kind of show that text. So that's where it can be beneficial. So not something you necessarily use on the day-to-day, but if you ever just wanted to write some text in the terminal and print it out, you could use echo to do that. But mainly you would use it in a lot of other programming languages where you'd be doing a lot more kind of lower level stuff where maybe you're going to be printing stuff to the terminal regardless. Just kind of depends on what you're doing. Not something I use a whole lot, but occasionally when I write a script or something, then I'll probably echo some text just to tell the user about stuff. Any questions about echo? Okay. Touch. So if we did man touch, we can see touch will change file access and modification times. So main thing here is the touch utility is will set the modification access times. However, if any file does not exist, it is created with default permissions. So touch is how we're gonna be creating files. So if I ever just need to create a file quickly, then I can use touch to do that. So the way that you've created files in the past in VS Code is, you know, you probably clicked on this icon right here, or you clicked on like that new file or whatnot. Under the hood, it's executing a touch command. So this is a easy way for a user to hit a new file, but it's still executing touch. So an easy way for me to create a file. So you can see right now, here are all of my files. So I'm going to create a file called index.html. You can see I don't have an HTML file currently. As soon as I do touch index.html, and now when I do an ls to list out all of my files, you can now see I have an index.html file that also now belongs inside of that directory. So it's really useful for whenever you just want to create files. So think about, you know, when you start an exercise, right? You usually have a whole bunch of files you start an exercise with at all times. So you could do, oh, I want to create my HTML file. I want to create my styles.css. I want to create my main.ts. I want to create my layout.css, whatever it is. So now in one command, I was able to create all 4 of those files at once. So just a nice, really easy, fast way to easily kind of create files. Any questions about touch? Okay, so touch is used for files. mkdir or mkdir is used for directories. So I can use touch to create individual files. I can use mkdir to create the directories. So in our case, you can see right here, I created that index.html. If I do mkdir, and let's just call it new directory, and now I'm going to do a dash ls-f. So that way I see those slashes after all directories. You can now see I now have a new directory called new directory. So touch creates files, mkdir will create new directories. If we use, there's other commands that we can use alongside of it. So if I use the -p option, then I can create nested directories. So if I wanted to create multiple directories at once, then I can modify that with that -p. And then to verify hidden files, that's why I had us do the ls-a, because it'll allow us to see those hidden files. So touch individual files, mkdir for actual directories. Any questions about mkdir? Okay, the next one is MV. So we do man MV. We can see MV stands for move files. So in its first form, the MV utility will rename the file that was named by the source operand to the destination path named by the target operand. So you'll use MV to essentially rename files. So in this case, we have a directory called Pokemans. Well, if I want to rename it to Pokemon, then I could do our MV. And so I think it would be Pokemans. So what directory am I wanting to rename? Pokemans. And then what do I want to rename it to? I want to rename it to Pokemon. So now MV Pokemans Pokemon. And now when I do my ls again, and now you can see my directory has been renamed to Pokemon.
It says we can move. How we can move? Like,
well, we did move. So if we think about it, right? I no longer have a directory called Pokemons. I moved it to a directory called Pokemon.
I thought it just for me it changed the name.
I renamed, but renaming is moving because I now said Pokemans no longer existed. So I moved this directory to this directory, Pokemon. We're renaming it, but that is still moving. You're changing the location. It's no longer /Pokemans, it's /Pokemon.
So if we have a text file, we can do like a MV, the content.txt, and we put Pokemon folder. It's gonna move it inside, right?
Yep. Okay. Next one is RM. This is how we can remove files or remove directories. So if we do man mr rm, you see it will attempt to remove the non-directory type files specified. So RM by itself is only going to remove files. You can see it says non-directory type files. So RM by itself is only going to remove files. Now, if I include the -D option, then you can see that -D is also going to attempt to remove directories as well as type of other files. So by itself, RM is just going to remove files. If we pull it up again, there's a -r and a -f option. We look at the lowercase r. You can see R is equivalent to big R, which means it's going to attempt to remove the file hierarchy C rooted in each file argument. If the I option is specified, essentially. Okay, so essentially what this is doing is the -R is going to make it recursive. So it's going to recursively keep calling it. So attempt to remove the file hierarchy C rooted in each file argument. So what it's going to do is if I did man or rm-rf kill me, it's going to go inside the kill me directory. If there's another directory inside of that directory, it's going to go inside of that directory, and it's going to keep on going. So that's what the -R is doing. It's essentially saying keep on executing alongside the directories inside. The -F is going to remove a file without prompting for confirmation. So it's not gonna give us an option to essentially not delete the file. It's gonna essentially say, you know, just it's gonna try to delete it regardless. So we want to delete the lol.txt file. So if I do an ls, you can see I have lol.txt. If I do rm lol.txt, and now you can see I no longer have an lol.txt file. I now removed it. I've deleted it. If I want to remove the kill me directory, then I can include that -r. So now if we do rm-r kill me. Now when I do an ls, you can see I no longer have that kill me listed. Since we included the -r argument, it recursively deleted all of the file contents. So you can see that's why I deleted everything inside that kill me directory. Any questions about RM? Okay, the last one is or not the last one, but second to last one is copy. So when you use CP, so if we do man CP, we can see that it stands for copy files. So if I ever need to copy a file from one location to another location, this is how I can essentially do that. So in our case, we have a file called and then text. So and then text right here. And I want to create a copy of it called no and then text. So if I do CP and then the name of the file. So what file do I want to copy? And then where do I want to copy it to? I want to copy it to no and then .text. So I'm essentially taking a file, copying its contents, and then creating a new file with those contents. So now you can see I have both a and then .text, and then I now have my new no and then .text file right here that we just created from the copy. And just to verify that they have the same contents, I can use cat. So if I cat and then .text and then cat no and then .text, you can see they have the exact same file content. So if I ever just need to copy a file and take that content and then paste it in a new file or create a file with it, then we can use the CP to do that as well. Any questions about CP? All right, well, last but not least is history. So if we do man history, we can see that history will allow us to see a collection of commands that we've ran in the past. So now if I do history, you can see it shows me all of the commands that I have ran in my terminal instance. So you can see all of the last ones. It shows me even the order. So it has these numbers, so I know which one I ran before the last one. This can be definitely handy, especially like I was saying, if you ever had to work on like your production server. For instance, like I wasn't in charge of deployments at my last job, but in case the guy who usually handled that was out of town, on vacation, I still needed to be able to handle it. But maybe I wasn't fully familiar with all of the commands he did. So I could use history and it would show me anything that he did in the past. So then it gave me a general idea of what I needed to do. So just handy if you ran a command some point in the past and maybe you just forgot what you did, or you just want to check out the order of it. Maybe you accidentally did something and you need to figure out what you did. Then you can use history to get a kind of a snapshot of all of the commands that you've ran. That's it. Take a look at the quiz questions. Trey, can you tell me what is a CLI?
It's the command line interface.
Yeah, exactly. The CLI stands for the command line interface. Essentially just any way that you're interacting with the command line. So in our case, it's via terminals. I'm directly interacting with the command line of a computer. Whereas in Noah, what is a GUI?
It's a graphical user interface, like a VS Code.
Yeah, exactly. So it stands for graphical user interface. You'll hear some people call them GUIs, but it's essentially just anything graphical. So just like how Noah noted, VS Code. VS Code is essentially a GUI, right? Like how I showed when you might have been creating files by clicking this icon right here, the new file. Under the hood, it is still executing a touch command. But as a user, I have a nice UI that gives me a nice way to interact and to do that. It's kind of extracting that logic away from me. So this is a GUI. It's a tool that gives us a way of handling that stuff. GitHub, right? GitHub is another GUI. It's handling a lot of that Git management for us, right? With the repositories and whatnot. Spotify is a GUI for playing your music and whatnot, right? So just all a GUI is just some sort of a graphical user interface that gives users an easy way of using your application. So let's give one use case for each of the commands that were listed. So Trey, could you give me a use case for man?
Yeah, I just did like man ls.
Yeah. So if we ever just need to pull up the manual for anything, maybe I forgot how to use a command, I can pull up the manual. We saw that a lot of those commands have different options based off of if you do, -F, -A or whatnot. Maybe I need to figure out a specific option I can use. Then I could use the manual to pull that up and to take a look. Noah, what about cat? What is the use case for cat?
Like for example, cat. To view TXT, like cat.txt file, you can view.
Yeah. So if I ever just want to view or print the contents of a file. Trey, what about ls?
I did ls/images to list the images in the images file or
Yeah,
folder.
Yeah, you could do that. Maybe you just wanted to see all the images that were inside of a directory, you could do ls. But whenever I just want to see all the files, just all directories, just kind of see the current state of where I'm at, what files, what directories do I currently have access to. Noah, what about PWD?
Just PWD is going to show the current directory.
Yep. So if I just ever wanted to know what current directory I'm at, I could use PWD. Trey, what about Echo?
So Echo, it displays the message in the terminal, but I did like Echo and then the quotes 1-23-25 and then the greater than sign to put it in an updates.txt file, just to show when I did my last update.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we mainly will use it whenever we needed to print something to a terminal. But like how you just noted too, if you ever wanted to, print text, but then also kind of create a file with that printed text or whatnot, we could use it alongside that greater than symbol. So yeah, maybe you wanted to like echo your notes, you could technically answer your quiz questions that way, right? Where you kind of echo the notes and then kind of printed them there. But Noah, what about touch? What's a use case for touch?
Create file.
Yeah, so I just,
The touch like content.txt.
yeah, if I just ever needed to create a file, touch is useful. Trey, what about McDir?
So it creates a new directory, and I did make dir and then new dash project.
Yeah, exactly. So creates new directories. So useful for whenever I just need to create a new directory, like I'm starting a new project and I need to get set up and going. Noah, what about MV?
MV.
Yep.
Yeah, it's rename the file.
Rename the files.
MV from source to destination.
Yep. So it'll be named
Content.txt to file.txt.
Yep. Exactly. Trey, RM.
Since Noah just created that new file to move it, I'm gonna remove it with that one.
Exactly. So RM can be used to remove both files and directories, depending on the options or those flags that we include. But whenever we need to delete stuff. Noah, what is CP, or what is the use case for CP?
It's copy the file from
Mhm.
destination like a CP content.txt to a destination like a directory inside it with the content.txt.
Yep. So if I ever just needed to copy a file, then I could use CP. And then Trey, what are the 3 virtues of a great program?
Laziness, impatience, and hubris.
Laziness, impatience, and hubris. Exactly.
Is it like the movie what Gladiator, like what is the virtues?
Yep. So exactly. As developers are lazy because we want to do as little work as possible. We're impatient because computers are frustrating, and then we have hubris because we don't want to do things that people will say bad things about. Awesome. Any final questions about the command line basics? All right. I'm gonna stop the recording.